Welcome to a web exclusive. I'm Mike Montecalvo, along with Eyewitness News analyst Lieutenant General Reginald Centracchio. We will talk pensions, General, because everyone's talking pensions. Also, the United Nations releasing new information saying that they think now that Iran is also building nuclear weapons. But first, let's talk about a topic that just won't seem to go away, General, and it's Occupy Providence. The deadline has come and gone, but now we're 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving. Do you see now the timetable really coming to a close here?
I think you'll probably see some definitive action in the next several days. As a matter of consequence, I think Commissioner Perry has been more than fair. Certainly Taveras has been more than fair, giving them ample opportunity to get their message out there. But now we're getting to a point where it is in fact involving the economy of Providence as well as tourism. So I think you'll probably see in the next several days, if not sooner, that there's going to be a situation that they'll be either evicted or asked to leave, and you'll see a combination of some of them leaving, some of them won't. And you have to deal with that residual amount staying there.
Well, the economy that you're talking about obviously is restaurants, but we're talking about the ice rink, and that will be in operation soon, and of course the Providence Place Mall being Christmas.
Yeah.
So that's where the hit probably will be.
I think what we're not seeing, and I do believe I have nothing to base this on other than common sense, you're probably seeing some of the businesses in the area saying, look, this has got to come to a close. It's affecting our business, and surely as we get close to the holidays, that's going to have an impact on it.
You got to believe, though, that they've been saying this now for a while.
Maybe, but we haven't seen it publicly. But I do believe that they probably have had conversations with the mayor and certainly the commissioner saying, okay, we'll go along with understanding, you give them as much time as possible. They have a right to free speech and a right to gather, but now it's impacting our businesses, and as we get closer to the holidays, that's not negotiable. Is
this a lack of respect for the law at this point?
I think it's certainly a test. You're getting at the point now where they've been given ample opportunity to get their message out. Now we're at the point where, okay, you've done this, we've cooperated with you, it's been peaceful. We're at the time frame where now we have to clear you, you have to leave, and if you don't do this, you're going to force us into making some movement on you to evict you if you don't leave peacefully.
Well, it has been peaceful so far. They've had a couple of problems inside Burnside Park. But they keep saying they don't want to turn it into Oakland, or they keep saying they don't want it to turn into Occupy Oakland because they knew what happened there, that there's a possibility the Providence police could just go in there and rip all those tents out too.
Well, I think that's always an option. I don't think you'll see that, but I think you'll probably see a combination of the many personalities that are involved in this thing. You have those that will leave because they've been asked to. You have those that may take a little bit of prodding to leave, and you'll see those that will stay there regardless and have to be hauled away.
What about negotiations? Let's say, all right, we'll leave Burnside Park, but we want to go somewhere else in Providence.
I think that's certainly a possibility, and I think you'll see that. There'll be some kind of a negotiation, as you put it, saying, okay, we'll leave Burnside, but we're going to relocate here. That may be okay. Stay there as long as you like, because you're not interfering with public safety, you're not interfering with the economy, you're not interfering with the rink, and all those, in tourism certainly. So if they wanted to take up a site somewhere adjacent to the city that doesn't impact on all the things that we just discussed, you could probably see them there for several months.
We're getting mixed messages too. Is Mayor Taveras welcome or not welcome? Some of the people don't want him there. He has been inside the park, and some people do say they want his input.
I think I have to give him credit for trying to be able to have some kind of an appreciation of why they're there. But I do believe they've lost an opportunity to get their message out. It seems to change from day to day. One day it's Wall Street, another day it's something else, and so on and so forth. Taveras has gone in the midst of all that and tried to say, okay, we understand you're here, we'll try to cooperate with you the best you can, but there will be a time where I may have to exercise my authority as the mayor to ask you to leave. And that day is right around the corner, I feel. And
that plan has to be in place already.
There's no doubt in my mind the plan is in place. Could be one of a simple eviction notice and they leave. It could be one that some will take a little more than that, and you may have some, one or two perhaps, that might need more than that. But there is, and I don't know this for a fact, but I would think, certainly based upon my experience, there has to be a plan in place to be able to take it from a peaceful movement to something that would escalate into violence, perhaps.
What about the public safety of downtown Providence? We had over 1,000 people at the State House, protesting the pensions. You have this going on. There seems to be quite a few protests over the last couple of months at the Rhode Island State House. So that's got to be taxing law enforcement, too.
It is, no doubt about it. It's obviously taxing the Providence Police Department well beyond their budgeted considerations, but I think you'll see more and more of this. Apparently, the protesting is the time we're in, regardless of whether it's the Occupy Providence or protesting the possibility of changing the pension system or whatever else might cause it. It seems to be that's what we're doing today. A large number of people showing up at the same time protesting.
All right, I mentioned about the pension protest. House and Senate Finance Committees are scheduled to vote on that pension plan on Thursday, and at that point, if it gets out of committee and what happens there, you could be several weeks down the road. The COLAs seem to be the big thing about the 3%. Do you think that will be taken out of the budget, or out of the proposal, I should say?
I think you may see an adjustment to that somehow, and I think, once again, common sense in this whole approach would mean that when you have elderly people depending on a limited pension and with a somewhat of a residual COLA, they really depend on that. When you have someone that can perhaps absorb that COLA by looking to another job or a secondary job, that's a possibility. But somewhere along the line, I think you'll see an adjustment. I don't think it'll go away totally.
What happens if it's a major adjustment and it's doesn't look like anything what General Treasurer Gina Raimondo has proposed? What happens at that point?
I don't think you'll see a major change. I think you'll see perhaps a reamortization and a combination of a fraction of a COLA taken out, maybe tying it to the National Social Security Plan, if you will, looking at different indices to make that decision. I don't think you'll see a large-scale major change to the pension plan.
All right, so you're talking about tweaking, but if there was an expert that also said this week that Rhode Island's plan or pension deficit is not $9.3 million, but it's actually $18 billion. So we're way off on our calculations.
Two issues have to do with that. First is the actuary table suggesting we're all living longer, and it may be so. What he's saying that is the case, and what we're saying in some cases that isn't the case, which would mean the liability and the amount of funding would not have to be as great as 18 billion versus 7 to 9 billion. The secondary and perhaps most important is the return of investment, which is presently being looked at as 7.5%. The reality of it is perhaps closer to 4.5% and 5%, which could in itself explain the difference between 9 billion and 18 billion over a several years period.
And of course, Eyewitness News will be at the State House for those votes tomorrow. UN Nuclear Atomic Energy Agency believes now that Iran has been conducting secret experiments for a nuclear weapon. This is something that I remember, I think you probably talked about a year ago that this was going on. Why did it take so long for the United Nations now to come around on this?
The United Nations, I think, realizes that you have an extremely volatile scenario in the Mideast. To allow Iran to procure a nuclear weapon would be absolutely horrendous. And I think what they're doing is setting it up in order to establish credibility with the rest of the world, understand they cannot allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. At the same time, I think we've seen this back in the 80s when Israel went in there unilaterally to take out those particular sites. I wouldn't put it past them. They've already discussed this openly within the last week as to whether a preemptive strike on Iran nuclear facilities would be in order for Israel. They haven't made that definitive decision yet, but they are talking about it. So I would suggest that if they have more information about the exact status of the nuclear program in Iran looking to nuclear weapons, you will see a strike by Israel, perhaps unilaterally.
What about the status of a Palestinian state at this point? There are some people in the UN saying that that absolutely will not happen now.
I don't think you'll see it at this particular point. There's too much riding on whether, in fact, Israel would agree to pull out of the West Bank and not establish any more expansion. And they've openly said over the last several weeks they've authorized more expansion. That's perhaps one of the bedrock issues as it relates to having a Palestinian state and having Israel pull out of there. I don't see that happening.
And finally, Friday is Veterans Day, and there are a lot of ceremonies that are taking place. Even some of the high schools are getting in with ceremonies allowing veterans to come to early football games, LaSalle being one of them, at 11 o'clock on Friday. Let's talk about the meaning of Veterans Day. Obviously, I know it's a special day for you. You spent just about your whole adult life in the military. What does that mean for a retired vet?
You know, when you look at what the meaning is of Veterans Day, it really started, the genesis of it was back in when it was originally called Armistice Day, the 11th hour, the 11th day, and the 11th month. And that was the end of World War I. From that day, it migrated to be referred to as Veterans Day. But it's a time to remember and to thank all of our previous soldiers and all of our veterans for allowing us to continue to be a country as we know it, and to enjoy the freedoms that we take for granted so many times. So it's just a day to remember and thank our veterans. Well,
General, Veterans Panel is looking at the issues of, what soldiers are going through when they're coming home. And there are a lot of issues now. It's just not, physical health issues, but mental health issues seem to be at the top of the list at this point.
And I think now it's recognized that post-traumatic syndrome and the diseases that go with that is a mental problem. That was never accepted as readily as it is today.
Why?
Before, it just wasn't. It was called shell shock. It was called something else, but they just didn't want to embrace it as a legitimate problem, as a legitimate trauma, because it wasn't physical. You couldn't see it. And sometimes they would look at it as, well, they're making this up. Now there are more systems in place to really make the determination it's real. And we've yet to come up with a system to support the significant impact that has on veterans coming home and experiencing the mental disorders.
And are you talking about a screening process, too, when they come back to, let's say, the States, that they need to go through a battery of tests?
Absolutely. And many of them don't want to, even at this point.
Should they be forced to do that?
Well, I think I think it's a matter of having the family and the soldier educated that this is no longer something that should put a stigma on them. They need to do this because it's their long-term health care that they're concerned about. It's nothing to be admitting that you have some kind of a mental problem and a mental challenge because you were in combat and this was a residual effect on you. So it's a matter of acceptance, education, and getting the care necessary to be able to deal with it.
What about the family? We talk about the soldiers coming back and being screened. So many times we see the burden on the family. Should they go through some type of screening process?
Absolutely, and they do. We're trying to make some kind of an impact on family readiness programs, having them participate in different programs that are designed to have the families aware that when your soldier comes back, either a female or male, they come back into an environment that you may not be ready for. And so they try to educate them to understand there will be some transition there. And that's part of the whole problem, accepting what you may see coming back that you didn't see believing, and having to do with financial aspects of it, who's in charge of the family, who's the breadwinner, and those kinds of things that we just take for granted.
And respecting the veterans too, there's the Delaware funeral home that apparently have lost body parts of veterans. What does that say?
It actually goes beyond just the funeral home. It's the actual place at Dover where all of our fatalities come back into the United States, and they're dispersed from that point. It's a bad word, dispersed, and it's not my intent. They're replaced, their particular, whatever's can be recovered in the form of a body goes to a funeral home elsewhere. Well, unfortunately, there have been several scenarios where they've lost body parts, could not account for different parts of the body.
How does that happen, though, General?
Because, they may, and this sounds gruesome to some extent, I don't intend to do that, but the body may come back in a body bag. Unfortunately, it may not be all in one piece. And when they start to account for the wholeness of the body, perhaps the system is not in place that would give them the responsibility for accountability of having a whole body. And so they may, from time to time, have a lapse in the system when nobody's paying attention, and stuff like this happens.
Something we should look at quickly?
Absolutely. There's an investigation going on as we speak, and I think there's a possibility that the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force and the commander of the Dover Air Force Base point could be replaced.
Well, General, thank you for your service, and happy Veterans Day.
To you, thank you.
Okay, and thanks for watching.